Hi, this is Oswald Sabrino. This short book video is on the latest book that we have in the series, Five Lessons from Great Thinkers. The thinker today is a political economist, Joseph A. Schumpeter, who was born in Austria and eventually emigrated to the United States to teach at Harvard University. He is a hot topic among economists and business writers because he coined the phrase creative destruction. Coined it as far as I know. I don't know if anyone used it previously. As far as I know, at least we can say he made it famous, okay? Creative destruction, which was his way of saying that through creative destruction, the capitalist economy renews itself with technological and productive and consumer advances. And so he's a big influence on those who emphasize innovation in the economy and entrepreneurship, which is a big topic in the United States and in other countries, and certainly a big topic among business schools and universities in the United States. So, 5 lessons from Schumpeter. The subtitle is Capitalism and Democracy in the 21st Century. Let me read some snippets from the preface to tell you the unique circumstances of this book in our series. This short book in the Lessons from Great Thinkers series is a bit different from the previous books. I have used for this book an essay that I wrote way back in 1998. So about 28 years, almost exactly. My original essay is dated January 1998, so it's 28 years. Remarkable how time passes. For you young people, make note of that. It passes fast. The essay was on this Austrian-American economist, as I said, Joseph Schumpeter, who was born in 1883 and died in 1950. Most famous, as I just said, for his famous idea of creative destruction. My essay's title, 28 years ago, is Capitalism and Democracy in the 21st Century. I retrieved it from my old files and reread it. I was surprised that I still like the essay, for those of you who look at things you wrote many years ago, so I was very surprised by that. It also helped that there was a typewritten manuscript that was very neat and clean and well done. I'm not sure who typed it. I probably paid a typist. It was so well done. But it gave memories from the old days before we used word processors, or at least before I used a word processor. But most importantly, I found the essay's insights still relevant today after almost 3 decades. I wrote the essay when I was a newly minted Master of Arts graduate in economics, teaching as an adjunct lecturer at Cleveland State University in Cleveland, Ohio. I thoroughly enjoyed this first foray into college teaching and have continued to enjoy college teaching ever since and have gone on to different subjects beyond economics. The essay's reference to insights from the 21st century also makes it relevant for us today in 2026 because obviously we're now deep into the 21st century. Although, even back in 1998, some would have said we were already in the 21st century. One writer commented that the 21st century began with the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 that led to the collapse of the Soviet Union. So I still think the essay's timely. You will be the ultimate judge. And let me continue with the preface. I think the gap in years from 1998 to 2026 is also valuable because we can look back and see were the essay's insights based on Schumpeter's insights still relevant, or how did they do in the intervening years? Were they completely off base, or are they still insightful and indicative of things going on in 2026? So to give you a flavor of the book, I took the parts of the essay and made them into 5 chapters. The first one is Civilization and Economic Change. Number 2, political theory, democracy, and law. So Schumpeter was a political economist, not just a typical economist as we have today. Economics is very mathematical. Some economists look beyond a narrow scope and try to encompass social institutions. That's what Schumpeter did in the tradition of the famous sociologist and political economist and religious thinker Max Weber, who preceded Schumpeter, although both from the Germanic-speaking culture, Schumpeter being Austrian and Max Weber from Germany. So when there is a chapter, Democracy and Law, is because Schumpeter, a trained lawyer like Max Weber, thought that law was obviously a very important institution, as common sense tells us, for economics. And democracy, that's obviously a very important topic. Even more important today in 2026, when there is a question, unbelievable to most of us who are older, whether democracy will survive, even in the United States, that's always was the beacon of democracy for so long. The third chapter is the capitalist economy. That heading is no surprise. And then chapters 4 and 5 look at trends for the 21st century. The first one concentrating on the West, and the subsequent chapter concentrating on trends in East Asia. So the essay looks at East Asia as extremely important. That's still true today. China is now unequivocally a superpower. And actually, the essay gave importance to Japan, but the significance of Japan has declined as the power of China has gained in the years subsequent to the 1998 essay. Then I give a conclusion, and I give a postscript from 2026, where I add my current reactions and questions from looking at the old essay on Schumpeter from 1998. Schumpeter's classic work was published in 1942. It's called Capitalism, Socialism, and Democracy. It's a large work, and he's very detailed and very erudite, and you can see that he was broadly educated, as we know from his biography, of all his insights. He's very creative. He's not your typical economist focusing on a particular macroeconomic model and on mathematical equations. He's very much a political economist. He's an institutionalist. He's in a way a sociological economist who looks at how these institutions influence the economy. What insights do I gain? He spoke a lot about the motive for entrepreneurship, the bourgeois motive for founding a firm and saving for the future. And he tied that to a family motive. So he said that there was already a tendency in the 30s and 40s for people in the West to have less children. He thought that was problematic for entrepreneurship in the long run, because that diminished people's ambitions to make, quote, a family dynasty in their business, or founding a family is another phrase I recall from the book. So that's an important demographic question. We have a demographic collapse in childbearing in Europe, to some extent in the United States, especially if you ignore immigration. And now the United States is in a move to be hostile to immigrants and eliminate immigrants as much as possible, whether legal or illegal. And that clearly is going to be damaging to having a younger population in the United States to support older people, to support pensioners, people on Social Security. Japan sees a demographic collapse. So one of the questions in the postscripts, should we even include Japan in East Asia, because the patterns in Japan are so similar to Western Europe and the United States. And Japan, in addition, is a democracy, unlike China. And China is a tough question, as I raise in the postscript. What is China? It is technically a communist state, an authoritarian state, a dictatorial state. At the same time, there are strong, clearly capitalist elements. And it is an economic superpower because of that, because it has adapted the communist ideology to capitalism, its own unique version of capitalism. So there are many questions for future researchers, especially sociologists and anthropologists, and hopefully economists, to look at what exactly is going on in China. And after this book was published, I noticed in the media that even China is now experiencing a decline in the birth rate that is concerning to the Chinese government. So the question is, well, is China becoming more like the West and more like Japan? So the value of this is that Schumpeter never considered himself a prophet, someone who predicted the future. He considered someone who identified trends, and that if these trends would continue in the same way, these may be the consequences. Of course, life changes constantly, so trends will change, okay? And so what's valuable in Schumpeter? It's not predictions of the distant future. It's valuable, I think, in my personal opinion, his way of looking at the economy, a broad way, looking at the demography, the sociology, the legal institutions, the political institutions. And that's a fruitful way to look at the economy instead of the very narrow way that we have among many economists who put blinders on and can give us fantastically wrong predictions and prognostications because they're not people coming from a broadly educated tradition like Weber before Schumpeter and Schumpeter himself. So I encourage you to read the book. It's short, and I think you'll like it. And as usual, this may encourage you to read the writings of this thinker, the original writings, to his classic capitalism. I always forget the order. Let me make sure I get it correct. His classic Capitalism, what comes second? It's Capitalism, Socialism, and Democracy for 1942. So maybe you'll read that. It's a large book, but you can dip into it as you find convenient. And this book hopefully will encourage you, as I hope in every book in my series, to look at the original sources. It's not a replacement for that, but an invitation to look at it and see if this particular thinker is so interesting to you that you might go to the library and check out one of his classic works. And his classic work from 1942 is Capitalism, Socialism, and Democracy. He has a lot to say about socialism and Marxism. He obviously looks at history and all the factors. And it's interesting the way, as I understand him, he defines socialism is centralized management and direction of the economy. So in that sense, many people in the United States that are now called socialist by political opponents to try to demonize them in an irresponsible way would not be socialists under this definition, because I'm not aware of any prominent American democratic socialist who advocates centralized government management to command the economy from the government, with the government directing economic decisions. So Joseph Schumpeter, great insights on economy, richer and broader, in my opinion, than many people who call themselves economists today. Thank you.